In the cold depths of space, where credits buy lives and death comes cheap, humanity has learned one universal truth. Everything has a price tag. Slaves sell for thousands, warships for millions, and hope, well, hope doesn't trade well in the galactic markets. But when Tara Vance, a grease-stained mechanic from the outer colonies, stumbles into a black market auction with only 3 credits to her name, she's about to discover that sometimes the most valuable things come with the smallest price tags. What she buys that night isn't just a dying alien creature marked for execution, it's a legend that will shake the foundations of an empire. They call them dragons in the old stories, beings of fire and fury that once ruled the stars before vanishing into myth. The hegemony has spent centuries hunting down the last of their kind, turning them into gladiatorial entertainment before their inevitable deaths. But they never counted on human stubbornness or the fact that some things are worth more than credits. When Tara refuses to let her 3-credit purchase die, she doesn't just save a life, she awakens something that the galaxy thought was extinct forever. And when a dragon roars in defiance, even the stars themselves take notice. This is the story of how humanity learned that some bonds can't be bought, some spirits can't be broken, and some roars echo across the universe loud enough to topple empires. Tara Vance wiped the grease from her hands with a rag that had seen better decades, squinting through the smoky haze of Nexus Station's lower levels. The cramped corridors reeked of recycled air, cheap alcohol, and desperation. She'd spent the last 18 hours jury-rigging a hyperdrive for a Centauri smuggler who paid in expired ration packs and empty promises. Now, with exactly 3 credits to her name and a rumbling stomach that hadn't seen real food in 2 days, she was seriously considering whether those expired rations were worth the risk of food poisoning. The mechanical bay where she worked was barely large enough for her toolkit and a fold-out cot. It wasn't much, but it was hers, sort of. The station's administrator, a blob-like hut named Gorza, let her stay in exchange for fixing whatever broken junk the local criminals dragged in. Tara had learned not to ask questions about the scorch marks or the suspicious stains. Credits were credits, and in the outer rim you took what you could get. She was packing up her tools when the commotion started echoing from the main corridor. Raised voices, heavy footsteps, and the distinctive whine of stun weapons charging up. Tara's first instinct was to lock her door and wait it out. Experience had taught her that curiosity in places like Nexus Station was a luxury she couldn't afford. But then she heard something that made her freeze. A sound so low and mournful it seemed to vibrate through the station's hull itself. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human. And it definitely wasn't any of the usual alien species that frequented this corner of space. Against her better judgment, Tara cracked open her door and peered down the corridor. A procession was moving toward the station's central hub, led by a pair of heavily armed hegemony soldiers in their signature black armor. Between them, suspended in an anti-grav restraint field, was something that made Tara's breath catch in her throat. The creature was massive, easily 12 feet long even in its weakened state. Its scales shimmered with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with its labored breathing. 4 legs ended in claws that could have torn through ship hulls, and a long serpentine neck supported a head crowned with elegant horns. Even bound and clearly dying, there was something regal about it, something that spoke of ancient power and dignity. Tara had heard stories, of course. Everyone in the galaxy had heard the legends of the dragons, the great star-spanning civilization that had ruled the cosmos before humanity had even discovered fire. Most people dismissed them as myths, bedtime stories told to children about magical beings who could breathe fire and fly between worlds. But looking at this magnificent creature, Tara realized the stories hadn't done justice to the reality. One of the soldiers noticed her watching and barked, "Move along, human!" Nothing to see here. Tara started to close her door, but the dragon's head turned slightly, and for just a moment, their eyes met. The intelligence she saw there was staggering. This wasn't some dumb animal being led to slaughter. This was a sentient being, aware of its fate, facing it with a dignity that put most humans to shame. The dragon's eyes were the color of molten gold, and in them Tara saw something she recognized all too well, the look of someone who had been abandoned by the universe. She followed the procession at a distance, keeping to the shadows and maintenance passages she knew so well. The central hub of Nexus Station was a massive spherical chamber that served as the unofficial town square for the station's residents. Usually it housed black market vendors, information brokers, and the occasional street performer. Today it had been transformed into an auction house. A crowd had gathered around a makeshift platform where various items were being displayed for sale. Tara squeezed through the throng of pirates, smugglers, and other unsavory characters, noting the excited chatter in a dozen different languages. The auctioneer was a thin Rhodian named Grease who ran most of the illegal trade on the station. "Ladies, gentlemen, and others," Grease called out in his reedy voice, "welcome to tonight's special auction. We have some truly unique items for your consideration, courtesy of our friends in the hegemony military." Tara's stomach churned as she realized what was happening. The hegemony was selling off captured enemies and contraband to fund their continued expansion across the galaxy. It was technically illegal under galactic law, but in places like Nexus Station, galactic law was more of a suggestion than a rule. The first few items were mundane: weapons, data crystals, and a terrified-looking Twi'lek who was purchased by a Hutt crime lord for mining operations. Tara felt sick watching sentient beings bought and sold like cargo, but she forced herself to stay. She needed to see what would happen to the dragon. When they finally brought the magnificent creature onto the platform, the crowd's excited chatter died to a whisper. Even hardened criminals seemed awed by the dragon's presence. Despite its restraints and obvious weakness, it held its head high, surveying the crowd with those piercing golden eyes. "Now this," Grease said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper, "is something truly special. A genuine dragon, one of the last of its kind. As you all know, these creatures are prized in the arena circuits of the inner worlds. This particular specimen is guaranteed to provide at least one spectacular death match before succumbing to its injuries." Tara felt her hands clench into fists. The casual way the auctioneer discussed the dragon's impending death made her want to punch someone, preferably him. The bidding started at 5,000 credits. Tara watched in growing despair as the price climbed higher and higher. A Klingon arms dealer bid 10,000. A representative of the Scorpion Syndicate raised it to 15. Soon, the bidding reached levels that Tara couldn't even comprehend. These people were casually throwing around more money than she'd see in her entire lifetime. But then something strange happened. The dragon began to weaken visibly. Its breathing became more labored, and the inner light of its scales started to dim. A medical scanner beeped urgently, and one of the hegemony soldiers whispered something to the auctioneer. Grease's confident expression faltered. "It appears our dragon friend is more seriously injured than initially assessed. Current medical readings suggest it may not survive transport to the arena worlds. Do I hear any bids for immediate entertainment purposes?" The crowd's enthusiasm dampened considerably. Nobody wanted to pay top dollar for a creature that might die before they could profit from it. The bidding stalled at 20,000 credits, then dropped as bidders began withdrawing their offers. 18,000! The auctioneer called out desperately. Surely someone wants to own a piece of living legend. No response. 15,000? 10? Still nothing. The crowd was already losing interest, turning their attention to other lots coming up for auction. Tara watched the dragon's condition continue to deteriorate. Its eyes were starting to close, and she could see the resignation settling over its features. It was giving up, accepting that its long life was about to end in this miserable place, surrounded by the dregs of galactic society. 5,000 credits for a dragon, Grease called out, his voice cracking with desperation. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," the crowd murmured, but no hands went up. Apparently, even the criminals and pirates of Nexus Station had standards when it came to wasting their money. 1,000 credits! Tara found herself stepping forward before she even realized what she was doing. Her hand went to the small pouch containing her last 3 credits, everything she had left in the universe. It was insane. It was stupid. It was financial suicide. But she couldn't stand there and watch this magnificent being die alone and unloved. "Going once at 1,000 credits, Grease called out, scanning the crowd desperately. The dragon's eyes opened again, and once more they met Tara's. This time, she saw something different there. Not just resignation, but a flicker of curiosity, as if it was wondering what this small human was doing so close to the platform. Going twice at 1,000 credits, Tara's mind raced. 3 credits wasn't enough to buy the dragon, but maybe she could do something else. Maybe she could cause a distraction, help it escape somehow. But as she looked at the heavily armed guards surrounding the platform, she realized how futile that would be. They'd both be dead within seconds. Final call, 1,000 credits for a genuine dragon. Going, 3 credits? Tara called out, her voice surprisingly steady despite her racing heart. The entire crowd turned to look at her. Grease's eyes widened in disbelief. Even the hegemony soldiers seemed taken aback. "I'm sorry, did you say 3 credits?" Grease asked, his voice dripping with disdain. 3 credits? Tara repeated, holding up her small pouch. "It's all I have." The crowd erupted in laughter. Someone shouted, "The humans broke." Another voice called out, "Throw her out." But Tara kept her eyes fixed on the auctioneer, waiting for his response. Grease looked around the crowd desperately. Surely someone can beat 3 credits for a dragon. Silence. The other potential buyers had already moved on to more promising lots. Nobody else was going to waste their money on a dying creature. The dragon was watching Tara now with renewed interest. Its golden eyes seemed to be studying her, as if trying to understand what motivated this strange human to make such a pathetic offer. "Look," Grease said finally, "I can't possibly sell a dragon for 3 credits. It would be insulting to the very concept of capitalism." "Then let it die here," Tara said quietly. "Let it die on your platform in front of all these people, because nobody thought it was worth the price of a decent meal." Her words cut through the crowd's laughter like a blade. Suddenly, the situation didn't seem quite so funny anymore. Even hardened criminals could recognize the tragic poetry in a legendary creature dying unwanted and unloved. Grease looked around the crowd one more time. No other bids were forthcoming. The dragon's medical readings were getting worse by the minute. Soon, he'd have a dead dragon on his hands and no money to show for it. "This is absolutely insane," he muttered, then raised his voice. "Sold! 1 dragon to the crazy human for 3 credits." The crowd exploded in a mixture of laughter, disbelief, and scattered applause. Tara felt her knees go weak as the reality of what she'd just done hit her. She'd just bought a dragon. A real living dragon. For 3 credits. She walked up to the platform on unsteady legs and handed over her pouch. Grease counted the credits with an expression of profound disgust, then gestured to the guards. "Release the restraint field," he ordered. "The dragon belongs to the human now." "Sir," one of the soldiers protested, "this creature is still dangerous. We can't just—" "It's more dead than alive," Grease snapped. "What's it going to do? Breathe fire on her? Look at it." The soldier reluctantly deactivated the anti-grav field. The dragon collapsed onto the platform with a heavy thud too weak to support its own weight. Up close, Tara could see the extent of its injuries. Blaster burns covered its flanks and several of its scales were cracked or missing entirely. One wing was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken, but it was the dragon's eyes that broke her heart. They were filled with confusion and wariness, as if it couldn't understand why this small human had just purchased it for pocket change. Tara reached out slowly, carefully, her hand extended palm up in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Hey there," she said softly. "I'm Tara. I know this is weird, but you're going to be okay now. I promise." The dragon studied her for a long moment, then slowly, carefully lowered its great head until its snout was just inches from her outstretched hand. She could feel the warmth of its breath, could see the intelligence burning behind those golden eyes. "That's it," she whispered. "I'm not going to hurt you. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." The crowd was dispersing now, moving on to other auctions and other entertainment, but Tara barely noticed. All her attention was focused on the magnificent creature in front of her, this legendary being that was now, somehow, her responsibility. "So," she said, sitting down on the platform beside the dragon's massive head, "I guess we're partners now. I have no idea what I'm doing, but we'll figure it out together. Deal?" The dragon's eyes closed slowly, but not in resignation this time. For the first time in what must have been months, it looked peaceful, as if it finally believed that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Tara looked around the now empty auction platform and tried not to think about the fact that she'd just spent her last 3 credits on a dying alien creature that she had no idea how to care for. She tried not to think about where they would sleep tonight, or what they would eat, or how she was going to explain this to Gorza. Instead, she focused on the steady rhythm of the dragon's breathing and the warmth radiating from its scales. She'd made her choice. For better or worse, she'd chosen compassion over common sense, hope over despair. Now all she had to do was figure out how to keep them both alive. Getting a 12-foot dragon back to her tiny mechanical bay turned out to be one of the more challenging engineering problems Tara had ever faced. The dragon, who had introduced himself in a rumbling telepathic voice as Pyrion, was too weak to walk more than a few steps without collapsing. The station's corridors were too narrow for his wingspan, even folded, and the maintenance shafts she normally used were completely out of the question. It took 3 hours, a borrowed anti-grav sled from a sympathetic Twi'lek cargo handler, and more creative profanity than Tara had used in her entire life, but they finally made it. Pyrion collapsed onto the small open space she'd cleared in the center of her workshop, his massive form taking up most of the available floor space. Tara had to climb over his tail just to reach her tool bench. "This is cozy," she muttered, surveying the cramped quarters. Her cot was now pressed against one wall, her workbench against another, and Pyrion filled everything in between. "I don't suppose dragons are capable of shrinking?" Pyrion's mental voice was weak but tinged with what might have been amusement. "I'm afraid not, Tara Vance, though I appreciate the thought." Tara paused in her rummaging through her medical supplies. She had a basic first aid kit designed for human injuries and a more advanced veterinary kit she'd picked up for working on the various alien creatures that sometimes showed up in damaged cargo. Neither seemed particularly adequate for treating a legendary star-spanning dragon. "How are you doing that?" she asked. "The talking in my head thing, I mean. Telepathic communication is natural to my kind," Pyrion explained, his eyes remaining closed as he concentrated on breathing. "Though I confess I'm surprised you can hear me so clearly. Most species require significant effort to establish a mental link." "Maybe I'm just weird," Tara said, pulling out antiseptic and bandages. "Wouldn't be the first time someone's told me that." She approached Pyrion carefully, medical supplies in hand. Up close, the extent of his injuries was even more heartbreaking. The blaster burns were deep, cauterizing wounds that must have caused excruciating pain. Several scales along his flanks had been torn away entirely, leaving raw, bleeding flesh beneath. His broken wing was the worst of it, the delicate membrane torn and the underlying bone structure clearly fractured. "This is going to hurt," she warned, opening a bottle of antiseptic. "I have endured worse," Pyrion replied, though she could sense the tension in his mental voice. Tara started with the smallest wounds, cleaning and bandaging what she could with her limited supplies. Pyrion bore the treatment in stoic silence, though she could feel waves of pain radiating from him whenever she had to work on a particularly damaged area. His skin was surprisingly warm to the touch, and she could feel a faint vibration beneath the scales, as if some kind of energy was flowing through his body. "How long were you in hegemony custody?" she asked, partly to distract him from the pain and partly because she was genuinely curious. 3 months, 14 days, Pyrion answered immediately. "They captured me during a raid on the Kepler Station archaeological site. I was, researching something there." Tara paused in her bandaging. "Researching? I thought dragons were extinct. The history books say your people disappeared thousands of years ago." "Not extinct," Pyrion corrected, and she sensed a deep sadness in his mental voice. "Scattered, hidden, reduced to so few that we might as well be myths. But there are still some of us left, still searching for answers." "Answers to what?" Pyrion was quiet for so long that Tara thought he'd fallen asleep. When he finally responded, his mental voice was heavy with ancient grief. "Why we fell." How a civilization that spanned galaxies could crumble so completely that most species don't even believe we existed. Tara continued working in silence, processing this information. Everything she'd been taught said that dragons were just legends, stories made up by primitive cultures to explain natural phenomena. But here was living proof that the legends were real, and apparently there was a lot more to the story than anyone knew. "The wing is the biggest problem," she said eventually, moving to examine the damaged appendage. The wing membrane was torn in several places, and she could see where bones had been fractured by blaster fire. "I'm not a doctor, but I don't think this is going to heal properly without specialized treatment." "It doesn't matter," Purian said quietly. "Even if the wing healed perfectly, I would never fly again. The hegemony took care of that." "What do you mean?" "Dragons don't just fly through muscle power," he explained. "We manipulate gravitational fields, bend space around us to achieve true flight. It requires a specific organ in our chest cavity, something your scientists would probably call a gravity gland. The hegemony removed mine." Tara's hand stilled on the bandage she was applying. "They what?" "It's a common procedure for captured dragons," Purian said with bitter matter-of-factness. "Prevents escape attempts. The organ can be harvested and used to power certain types of exotic technology. Very valuable on the black market." "Those bastards," Tara whispered, feeling anger building in her chest. She'd seen a lot of cruelty in her years on the Outer Rim, but this felt different. This was systematic, calculated torture, designed to strip away everything that made Purian what he was. "It's done," Purian said simply. "I am no longer truly a dragon, just a large, flightless reptile with delusions of grandeur." "That's bullshit," Tara said firmly, surprising them both with the vehemence in her voice. "You're still you. You're still intelligent, still dignified, still magnificent. They can cut pieces off you, but they can't change what you are inside." Purian's golden eyes opened and fixed on her. "You humans have an interesting perspective on identity." "Yeah, well, we're stubborn like that," Tara said, returning to her work. "It comes from being told we're worthless for most of our species' history. You learn to define yourself by what you choose to be, not what other people say you are." She finished bandaging the worst of his wounds and stepped back to survey her work. It wasn't pretty, but it would have to do. The real problem was going to be food and long-term care. Her workshop wasn't set up for housing a dragon, and she had no money left to buy supplies. As if reading her thoughts, Purian said, "You should not have purchased me Terravance. You've bankrupted yourself for a dying creature who cannot even repay your kindness." "First of all," Tara said, settling down on her cot and looking at him seriously, "my name is just Tara. We're roommates now, so let's skip the formalities. Second, who says you're dying?" "I am old, even by dragon standards," Purian replied. "My body was failing even before the hegemony's tortures. The stress of captivity and the removal of my gravity gland have accelerated the process. I have perhaps weeks left, maybe days." Tara studied his massive form, noting the way his breathing seemed labored and how his inner light had dimmed since the auction. She wasn't a doctor, but she'd spent enough time around dying machinery to recognize the signs. Purian was right. He was shutting down, and there wasn't much she could do about it with her limited resources. "Okay," she said finally, "so you're dying. That sucks, but you're not dead yet, and as long as you're not dead, we're going to focus on living." Starting with food, what do dragons eat? "Traditionally, we consume high-energy organic compounds," Purian said. "What you would probably call exotic matter. The energy released from matter-antimatter reactions, crystallized starlight, that sort of thing." Tara stared at him. "Please tell me you're joking." "I am not. However, I can survive on more conventional proteins in emergency situations. The hegemony fed me processed meat byproducts of questionable origin." "Right? Well, processed meat byproducts I can probably manage." Tara stood up and started rummaging through her supplies. She had some protein bars, a few cans of synthetic meat paste, and half a bottle of nutritional supplement drink. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She opened a can of meat paste and offered it to Purian. He sniffed it delicately, his expression suggesting he was less than impressed with the cuisine. It's not Starlight, Tara admitted, but it's got protein and calories. That's something. Pyrian accepted the offered food with as much dignity as he could muster while eating from a can. You are very kind, Tara. But I must ask, why? Why did you spend your last credits on me? Why are you taking care of me? We are strangers. Tara settled back on her cot and considered the question. It was a fair one. She'd acted on impulse at the auction, driven by emotion rather than logic. Now that she had time to think about it, she wasn't entirely sure she understood her own motivations. I guess, she said slowly, it's because nobody else would. You were dying alone in that crowd of people and nobody cared. Everybody was just seeing dollar signs or entertainment value. Nobody was seeing you as a person. I am not a person, Pyrian pointed out. I am an alien creature from a species most consider mythological. You're a sentient being with thoughts and feelings and dignity, Tara corrected. That makes you a person in my book, and persons don't deserve to die alone and unloved, no matter what species they are. Pyrian was quiet for a long time, his golden eyes studying her face. You humans are very strange, he said finally. Yeah, we get that a lot. We're also stubborn, compassionate to a fault, and too dumb to know when we're beaten. It's gotten us in trouble more times than I can count, and yet your species has spread across half the galaxy in less than 1,000 years, Pyrian observed. Perhaps there is wisdom in your foolishness. Tara was about to respond when a loud banging echoed through the workshop. Someone was pounding on her door with enough force to rattle the metal frame. "Vance!" a familiar voice bellowed. "Open up! I know you're in there." Tara's stomach dropped. She recognized that voice. It belonged to Gorza, the Hutt who controlled this section of the station. And judging by his tone, he was not happy. "Stay quiet," she whispered to Pyrian, then called out, "Just a minute. I'm not decent." "I don't care if you're naked and covered in engine grease," Gorza shouted back. "Open this door right now, or I'll have my boys blast it open." Tara looked around her tiny workshop, searching for somewhere to hide a 12-foot dragon. It was hopeless. There was nowhere to conceal Pyrian, and even if there was, Gorza would figure out what was going on the moment he stepped inside. "What do we do?" she whispered to Pyrian. "We face the consequences of your compassion," Pyrian replied, his mental voice calm despite the circumstances. "Though I confess I'm curious to see how this plays out." Tara took a deep breath, steeled herself for what was probably going to be a very unpleasant conversation, and opened the door. Gorza filled the doorway like a mountain of angry flesh. The Hutt crime lord was accompanied by 2 of his enforcers, a pair of heavily armed weequay who looked like they'd be happy to shoot first and ask questions later. Gorza's small, beady eyes swept the workshop and immediately fixed on Pyrian's massive form. "Well, well, well," Gorza rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. "What do we have here? A human mechanic and her pet dragon. How very touching." "Hello, Gorza," Tara said, trying to sound casual. "I was just about to come find you and explain." "Explain?" Gorza laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a cliff. "Oh, this should be good. Please enlighten me. Explain why one of my tenants has purchased an extremely valuable mythological creature and is now hiding it in my station." "It's not what it looks like," Tara began, but Gorza cut her off with a gesture. "It looks like you've stumbled into something worth far more than the 3 credits you paid for it," the Hutt said, slithering closer to examine Pyrian. "Do you have any idea what a live dragon is worth on the collector's market? The medical research value alone would be in the millions." Tara stepped protectively in front of Pyrian. "He's not for sale. Everything is for sale," Gorza corrected. "The only question is price. And you, my dear Tara, are in no position to negotiate. You owe me 6 months back rent on this workshop. Your dragon friend here represents an opportunity to pay that debt and make us both very wealthy." "I won't let you sell him," Tara said firmly. Gorza's expression darkened. "You won't let me? Girl, you seem to be confused about your position here. You are a debt-ridden mechanic squatting in my workshop. I am a legitimate businessman with connections throughout the sector. If I want to sell your dragon, I will sell your dragon. Pyrion's voice suddenly filled the workshop, not telepathic this time, but spoken aloud in a bass rumble that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull. Actually, you will not. Gorza and his enforcers stepped back in surprise. Apparently, they hadn't expected the pet to start talking. I am not property to be bought and sold, Pyrion continued, raising his massive head to look directly at Gorza. I am a free being who has chosen to accept Terra Vance's hospitality. Any attempt to remove me from this workshop against my will would constitute kidnapping under galactic law. Galactic law doesn't apply to mythological creatures, one of the Weequay enforcers sneered. No, Pyrion agreed mildly, but it does apply to sentient beings, and I am demonstrably sentient. I would be happy to prove my intelligence in any court of law you care to name. Gorza looked thoughtful, his criminal mind clearly working through the legal implications. Dragons might be legendary, but if this one could prove sentience, selling it would indeed constitute slavery, which was illegal even in the Outer Rim. Besides, Pyrion added, his golden eyes beginning to glow with inner fire, I should warn you that while the hegemony may have removed my ability to fly, they left my other capabilities intact. I am still quite capable of breathing fire, and these workshops are filled with highly combustible materials. To emphasize his point, Pyrion opened his mouth slightly and allowed a small jet of flame to escape. The temperature in the room spiked immediately, and Terra could smell the scent of superheated metal. Gorza's eyes widened and his enforcers reached for their weapons, but the hut held up a restraining hand. Now, Gorza said carefully, there's no need for violence. We're all civilized beings here. Perhaps we can work out some sort of arrangement. What kind of arrangement? Terra asked suspiciously. Your dragon friend is obviously valuable, Gorza said, but apparently not in the way I initially thought. However, a talking, fire-breathing dragon could be quite the attraction for the right kind of clientele. What if we set up some sort of performance contract? Absolutely not, Terra said immediately. Hear me out, Gorza continued. Nothing degrading or dangerous, just appearances. Maybe he tells stories about the old days, provides some historical perspective for scholars and tourists. Very dignified, very respectful. We split the profits 60-40. 60-40 in whose favor? Terra asked. Mine, obviously. I'm providing the venue and the marketing. Terra was about to tell Gorza exactly what he could do with his performance contract when Pyrion's mental voice stopped her. Accept the offer, he said telepathically. What? No way. I'm not putting you on display like some kind of circus animal. Listen to me, Pyrion continued privately. We need resources, food, medical supplies, a place to stay. You have no money and I have no ability to earn any. This arrangement could provide what we need while allowing me to maintain my dignity. Terra looked at the massive dragon, then at Gorza's expectant expression. She hated the idea of turning Pyrion into an attraction, but he was right about their situation. They needed resources, and she had no idea where else they might come from. 70-30, she said finally. In our favor. Gorza's eyes narrowed. 50-50. 60-40 our favor, and we get final approval on all performances, Terra countered. Deal, Gorza said quickly, clearly pleased to have found a solution that didn't involve anyone getting incinerated. We'll start small. A few private audiences with collectors and scholars. See how it goes. Terra looked at Pyrion, who nodded slightly. Fine, she said, but we do this on our terms. Pyrion is not a prisoner or an employee. He's a partner. Any agreement goes through both of us. Of course, Gorza agreed, backing toward the door. Very reasonable. I'll set up the first appointment for tomorrow afternoon. Nothing too strenuous, just a friendly chat with a xenoarchaeologist from the University of Coruscant. Should be quite pleasant. After the hut and his enforcers left, Terra slumped down on her cot, suddenly exhausted. I can't believe I just agreed to pimp you out for rent money. You did what was necessary for our survival, Pyrion said gently. There is no shame in pragmatism. I just wanted to help you, Tara said quietly. Now I've gotten us both trapped in some kind of weird business arrangement with a crime lord. You did help me, Pyrian assured her. For the first time in months, I have hope. I have a friend. I have a purpose beyond simply enduring until death. These things are worth more than credits. Tara looked at the magnificent dragon sprawled across her workshop floor, and despite everything, she found herself smiling. You know what? I think this might actually work out. Perhaps, Pyrian agreed, though I suspect our adventures are just beginning. Outside, the station hummed with its usual chaotic energy, but in the tiny workshop, human and dragon settled in for their first night together, each wondering what tomorrow would bring. Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived at Nexus Station 3 days later aboard a sleek research vessel that looked distinctly out of place among the battered freighters and pirate ships crowding the docking bays. Tara watched through the station's viewport as the xenoarchaeologist's security detail escorted her through the lower levels, noting the way other station residents gave the newcomers a wide berth. University of Coruscant researchers didn't usually visit places like this, and everyone seemed to sense that something significant was happening. Tara had spent the intervening days trying to make her workshop more presentable for their first client. It was a losing battle. No amount of cleaning could disguise the fact that they were living in a cramped mechanical bay with barely enough room for one person, let alone a 12-foot dragon. But Pyrian had insisted on the meeting, claiming that Dr. Vasquez's research might be relevant to his own quest for answers about his people's downfall. When the xenoarchaeologist finally arrived, Tara was surprised by how young she looked. Dr. Vasquez couldn't have been much older than Tara herself, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and intelligent brown eyes that immediately fixed on Pyrian with unmistakable excitement. Extraordinary, she breathed, pulling out a handheld scanner and beginning to take readings. The bone density, the scale patterns, the cranial structure, it all matches the archaeological evidence perfectly. Good afternoon, Dr. Carey. Vasquez. Pyrian said courteously, his mental voice carrying to all present, I understand you have questions about my people's history. Dr. Vasquez nearly dropped her scanner. You can communicate telepathically. This is incredible. Do you have any idea how many xenoarchaeologists would kill for an opportunity like this? Hopefully not literally, Terry interjected, settling into a corner where she could keep an eye on both the researcher and the corridor beyond. Gorza had promised this would be a simple academic consultation, but she'd learned not to trust Hutt crime lords completely. Dr. Peter Vasquez, Pyrian continued, I am told you specialize in pre-imperial galactic civilizations. What do your people's records say about the dragon hegemony? The researcher pulled up a holographic display from her portable computer, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy with various colored regions highlighted. The official historical record suggested that your people were a minor spacefaring civilization that disappeared sometime around 3,000 years ago, possibly due to resource depletion or internal conflict. But, Pyrian prompted, sensing there was more to the story. But we've been finding evidence that contradicts that narrative, Dr. Vasquez said excitedly. Archaeological sites throughout the galaxy show signs of advanced dragon technology that far exceeds what a minor civilization should have been capable of. Gravitational manipulation devices, exotic matter reactors, weapons that could destabilize entire star systems. Your people weren't just spacefaring, were they? You were the dominant power in the galaxy for millennia. Pyrian's golden eyes dimmed with ancient sadness. We were. The dragon hegemony spanned 17 galaxies at its height. We were explorers, scientists, philosophers. We believed in knowledge for its own sake in the pursuit of understanding the fundamental nature of reality itself. What happened? Dr. Vasquez asked softly. We grew complacent, Pyrian replied. We thought our technology made us invincible. We believed that our scientific advancement would protect us from any threat. We were wrong. Tara found herself leaning forward despite her intention to stay uninvolved in the conversation. This was the first time Pyrian had spoken in detail about his people's past, and she was as curious as the researcher. The Cascade War, Pyrian continued, his mental voice heavy with grief. That's what we called it, though by the time we understood what was happening, it was too late to prevent it. We had been experimenting with dimensional manipulation, trying to harness energy from parallel universes. The technology worked too well.
Dr. Vasquez was furiously taking notes on her scanner.
What do you mean, too well? We tore holes in the fabric of space-time itself, Pirian explained. Massive rifts that we couldn't close. At first, we thought they were merely dangerous anomalies that we would eventually learn to control. But things began coming through the rifts, things that should not exist in our reality. The temperature in the workshop seemed to drop several degrees. Tara felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. Entities from parallel dimensions, Pirian continued. Beings of pure energy and malevolence that existed solely to consume and corrupt. They were drawn to our reality by the very technology we had created. The more we used our dimensional manipulators, the more rifts appeared, and the more entities poured through. This sounds like science fiction, Doctor, Vasquez said, but her voice lacked conviction. I assure you, it was quite real, Pirian said grimly. The entities could possess other beings, turning them against their own kind. They could manipulate matter at the molecular level, corrupting our cities, our ships, our people. Worst of all, they learned from us. Every piece of technology they encountered, they adapted and improved upon. Tara felt sick to her stomach. How did you fight something like that? We didn't at first, Pirian admitted. We tried to negotiate, to understand what they wanted. Dragons have always believed in the power of reason and diplomacy, but these entities didn't want anything we could give them. They wanted everything we were. The war lasted 300 years, he continued, 300 years of watching our civilization slowly consumed from within. Planets corrupted beyond recognition, entire star systems quarantined and abandoned. By the end, we were no longer fighting to win, we were fighting for the right to exist at all. Dr. Vasquez had stopped taking notes, her scanner hanging forgotten in her hand. How did it end? With the great sacrifice, Pirian said quietly. The last of our scientists developed a weapon capable of sealing the dimensional rifts, but using it required an enormous energy source. Every dragon in the galaxy contributed their life force to power the device. Billions of my people died in a single moment, their essence transformed into pure energy to seal away the entities forever. The workshop fell silent except for the distant hum of the station's life support systems. Tara found herself struggling to process what she'd just heard. The scope of the tragedy was almost incomprehensible. But some of you survived, Dr. Vasquez said eventually. A few, Pirian confirmed. Perhaps a few hundred scattered across the galaxy. Those who were away from population centers when the Great Sacrifice occurred. We've spent the last 3,000 years in hiding, trying to ensure that the knowledge of dimensional manipulation dies with us. That's what you were researching at Kepler Station, Tara realized. You were looking for dragon technology that might still exist. There are caches hidden throughout the galaxy, technological archives that must be found and destroyed before someone else discovers them. The species that have risen since our fall, they're not ready for such power. If they unlock the secrets of dimensional manipulation, the entities might return. Dr. Vasquez looked pale. Dr. Japper chided. Pirian, if what you're telling me is true, then my entire research project may be incredibly dangerous. We've been excavating dragon sites, cataloging the technology we find, trying to understand how it works. What sites? Pirian asked urgently. The researcher pulled up her holographic display again, showing a list of archaeological excavations throughout the sector, 17 major digs in the past 5 years. We've recovered gravitational manipulation devices, exotic matter reactors, and something our physicists are calling a reality stabilizer. We don't understand what most of it does, but we're making progress. Pirian's entire body tensed, his scales beginning to glow with inner fire. Reality stabilizers are dimensional anchor points. If someone activates one without understanding the proper containment protocols, oh, gods, Dr. Vasquez whispered. We activated one last month. The energy readings were unlike anything we'd ever seen. Tara watched in growing alarm as Pirion struggled to get to his feet. The massive dragon was clearly agitated, his broken wing trembling with effort as he tried to rise. "Where?" he demanded. "Which site?" "The Helix Nebula excavation," Dr. Vasquez said quickly. "About 3 days' travel from here. We found an intact dragon research facility buried in an asteroid field. The reality stabilizer was in the central laboratory." "You have to shut it down," Pirion said urgently. "Send a message to your team immediately. Tell them to evacuate the site and leave the device alone." "I can't," the researcher said helplessly. "The excavation is being run by the hegemony now. They took over the project 2 weeks ago, claimed it was a matter of galactic security." Tara felt ice forming in her stomach. The hegemony? The same hegemony that captured and tortured Pirion? "They're not interested in historical preservation, Doctor," Vasquez said grimly. "They want the technology for military purposes. There are rumors that they're trying to weaponize whatever they find." Pirion collapsed back onto the workshop floor, his breathing labored. "This is what I feared. This is why the remaining dragons have spent millennia hiding the truth. In the wrong hands, our technology won't just threaten individual worlds. It could destroy the entire galaxy." "There has to be something we can do," Tara said, though she had no idea what. She was a mechanic with 3 credits to her name and a dying dragon for a partner. What could they possibly do against the most powerful military force in the galaxy? "Actually," Dr. Vasquez said slowly, "there might be. I have friends in the university who've been growing concerned about the hegemony's militarization of archaeological sites. If we could provide them with evidence of the real danger, what kind of evidence would they need?" Tara asked. "Proof that dragon technology is genuinely dangerous," the researcher replied. "Technical specifications, historical records, testimony from an actual dragon about what happened 3,000 years ago." Pirion was quiet for a long moment, his golden eyes fixed on something beyond the workshop walls. When he finally spoke, his mental voice was filled with resolve. "Dr. Vasquez, I will provide you with everything you need. Technical manuals, historical recordings, detailed accounts of the Cascade War. But in exchange, I need something from you." "What?" "Transportation to the Helix Nebula excavation site," Pirion said simply. "If the hegemony successfully activates that reality stabilizer without proper containment, they could trigger exactly the kind of dimensional rift that destroyed my people. I cannot allow that to happen." "Pirion, you're in no condition to travel," Tara protested. "You can barely stand, let alone undertake some kind of rescue mission." "This is not a rescue mission," the dragon corrected. "This is a prevention mission, and it is the responsibility of my people, even if I am the only one available to fulfill it." Dr. Vasquez looked between Tara and Pirion, clearly torn. "Even if I agreed to help, my research vessel isn't equipped for any kind of confrontation with hegemony forces. We'd be flying into a military operation with no weapons and no backup." "Then we'll have to be clever instead of strong," Tara said, surprising herself by automatically including herself in whatever insane plan was forming. "What kind of security does an archaeological site usually have?" "For a university dig, just a few security guards and maybe a perimeter fence," Vasquez replied. "But if the hegemony has taken over, probably a full military garrison. Patrol ships, defensive platforms, armed guards throughout the facility." Tara started pacing around the cramped workshop, her mind working through the problem. It was like trying to repair a hyperdrive with nothing but spare parts and determination, except the stakes were considerably higher. "What if we didn't try to fight them?" she said eventually. "What if we just got close enough for Pirion to shut down the device remotely?" "I would need to be within a few hundred meters," Pirion said thoughtfully. "Dragon technology responds to specific biosignatures. But getting that close to a hegemony military operation would be suicide." "Not necessarily," Tara said, an idea beginning to form. "Dr. Vasquez, what's your cover story for being here? Why would a university researcher be visiting a dragon?" "Official consultation," the xenoarchaeologist replied. "I'm here to gather first-hand historical accounts for my research into pre-imperial civilizations. Perfect. So it would be completely normal for you to want to bring your new dragon expert to examine artifacts at an active excavation site, right? In theory, yes, Vasquez said slowly. But the hegemony wouldn't allow a civilian researcher anywhere near a militarized operation. What if you weren't coming as a civilian? Tara pressed. What if you were coming as a hegemony contractor hired to provide expert analysis of the dragon technology they've discovered? Pyrion's eyes began to glow with something that might have been hope. The hegemony does hire outside specialists when they encounter technology beyond their understanding. They would need experts familiar with dragon systems. I'd have to falsify credentials, Dr. Vasquez said uncertainly. Create fake contracts, forge authorization codes. It would be highly illegal. So is experimenting with technology that could destroy the galaxy, Tara pointed out. The researcher was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the risks. Finally, she nodded. I have contacts who can help with the documentation. It would take a few days to set up, but it's possible. What about me? Tara asked. I doubt they'd let a random mechanic into a secure facility. Research assistant, Dr. Vasquez said immediately. Someone with technical expertise to help with the analysis. It's completely standard for archaeological expeditions. Pyrion struggled back to his feet, his massive form filling the workshop. For the first time since Tara had met him, he looked like the legendary creature she'd imagined dragons to be. His scales glowed with inner fire, his golden eyes burned with purpose, and when he spoke, his mental voice carried the authority of 3 millennia. Then we have a plan, he declared. Dr. Vasquez, begin preparing the falsified credentials. Tara, I will need you to help me regain enough strength for the journey ahead, and both of you should understand something clearly. He fixed them each with his burning gaze. This mission may very well be suicide. The hegemony will not hesitate to kill anyone who threatens their operations. Even if we succeed in shutting down the reality stabilizer, we may not survive the attempt. Then why are we doing this? Tara asked, though she already knew the answer. Because sometimes, Pyrion said simply, survival is less important than preventing catastrophe. Because someone must take responsibility for the mistakes of the past. And because, for the first time in 3,000 years, I have friends who understand what's at stake. Tara looked around her tiny workshop at the pile of medical supplies and the makeshift sleeping arrangements and the research notes scattered across her workbench. A week ago, her biggest worry had been paying rent. Now she was planning to infiltrate a hegemony military operation to prevent the destruction of galactic civilization. Well, she said with a grin that she didn't entirely feel, at least life isn't boring anymore. Outside the workshop, Nexus Station continued its chaotic existence. Unaware that the fate of the galaxy was being planned in a cramped mechanical bay by a human mechanic, an alien researcher, and a dragon who refused to let his people's greatest mistake destroy another generation of innocent lives. The adventure was about to begin. The journey to the Helix Nebula took 4 days aboard Dr. Vasquez's research vessel, the Archaeological Survey, and every moment of it was agony for Tara. Not because of the cramped quarters or the recycled air, but because she could see Pyrion getting weaker with each passing hour. The stress of preparing for their infiltration mission was taking a visible toll on the ancient dragon's already failing health. Dr. Vasquez had worked miracles with their falsified credentials. Her contacts at the university had created a complete paper trail showing her as a contracted xenoarchaeologist specializing in pre-imperial technology, with Tara listed as her technical assistant and Pyrion classified as a living cultural artifact on temporary loan for research purposes. The documentation looked authentic enough to pass casual inspection, though Tara doubted it would hold up under serious scrutiny. The trick, Dr. Vasquez had explained during their preparation, is to act like we belong there. Hegemony officials are used to dealing with contractors and specialists. As long as we look professional and confident, they'll probably just wave us through. And if they don't? Tara had asked. Then we improvise and hope for the best. Now, as the Archaeological Survey dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Helix Nebula, Tara was getting her first look at what a militarized archaeological site actually looked like. The answer was terrifying. The nebula itself was a swirling mass of stellar gas and cosmic dust lit from within by the dying light of ancient stars. Floating in the center of this celestial maelstrom was an asteroid field that had been transformed into a massive industrial complex. Hegemony warships patrolled the perimeter, their weapon systems tracking any vessel that came within scanning range. Mining platforms and construction drones swarmed around the largest asteroids, carving out landing bays and defensive installations. "Gods above and below," Dr. Vasquez whispered, staring at the tactical display. "This isn't an archaeological dig. It's a military base. With the most dangerous technology in galactic history sitting at its center," Pirion added grimly from where he lay sprawled across the ship's cargo bay. The vessel's corridors had been too narrow for his massive frame, forcing them to transport him like freight. It was undignified, but it was the only way to get him to the excavation site. Tara studied the scan results on her portable display, noting the energy readings coming from the central asteroid. "Pirion, that reality stabilizer you mentioned, how big would it be?" "The devices varied in size depending on their purpose," the dragon replied. "A small one might be the size of a land speeder. A large one could fill an entire building. Judging by the energy signatures I'm detecting, this appears to be a Class 7 stabilizer, which means what exactly?" "It means," Pirion said with dark humor, "that if the hegemony activates it incorrectly, the resulting dimensional rift will be large enough to swallow this entire star system before it destabilizes and spreads outward." "Wonderful," Tara muttered. "No pressure at all." Their comm system crackled to life and an authoritative voice filled the cabin. "Archaeological survey, this is Hegemony Command. State your business in this restricted area." Dr. Vasquez activated the transmitter with hands that were only slightly trembling. "Hegemony Command, this is Dr. DEPD. Elena Vasquez, University of Coruscant xenoarchaeologist. We're here under contract authorization 77 Alpha to provide expert analysis of the dragon artifacts you've recovered." There was a long pause. Tara held her breath, wondering if their forged credentials would hold up under scrutiny. "Archaeological survey, stand by for security scan." The ship shuddered slightly as military-grade sensors swept over them, probing every system and cargo hold. Tara watched the scan progress on her display, praying that nothing would seem suspicious about a human mechanic, an alien researcher, and a severely injured dragon traveling together. "Scan complete," the voice announced. "Dr. Vasquez, you're cleared to dock at Platform 7. Be advised that all civilian personnel are restricted to designated areas and must be accompanied by military escorts at all times." "Thank you for the clearance." As Dr. Vasquez piloted the ship toward the designated docking platform, Tara made her way back to the cargo bay to check on Pirion. The massive dragon was lying very still, his breathing shallow and labored. His scales had lost most of their inner glow, and his golden eyes seemed dimmed with exhaustion. "How are you holding up?" she asked quietly. "I have been better," Pirion admitted, "but I will endure." "This is too important for personal weakness to interfere." "You're not weak," Tara said firmly. "You're the strongest being I've ever met." "But strength doesn't mean pretending you don't need help." Pirion's eyes focused on her with something that might have been gratitude. "You humans continue to surprise me. Even facing probable death, you offer comfort to others." "Yeah, well, we're weird like that," Tara replied, checking his bandages and noting that several had soaked through with blood. "Just promise me something. If this goes bad, if we don't make it out of here, promise me you'll try to escape. Don't throw your life away for a lost cause." "I make no such promise," Pirion said quietly. "Some things are worth dying for. Preventing the return of the entities is one of them." Before Tara could argue, the ship shuddered as it docked with Platform 7. Vasquez's voice echoed through the intercom system. "We're here. I've got 3 hegemony officers waiting to escort us to the dig site. Everyone ready?" Tara took a deep breath and activated the cargo bay's anti-grav lift system. Getting Pirion off the ship and onto the platform would be the first real test of their cover story. The hegemony officers waiting for them were exactly what Tara had expected, professional, suspicious, and heavily armed. The leader, a stern-faced human woman with the rank insignia of a major, stepped forward as they emerged from the ship. "Dr. Vasquez, I'm Major Crane, security chief for this operation. I understand you're here to analyze our dragon artifacts." "That's correct, Dr. Vasquez replied with admirable composure. "This is my technical assistant, Tara Vance, and our cultural consultant, Pyrian." Major Crane's eyes widened slightly as she took in Pyrian's massive form. Even lying on the anti-grav platform, the dragon was an imposing sight. "I wasn't told we'd be hosting a live dragon." "He's essential to the analysis, Doctor," Vasquez said smoothly. "Dragon technology is biometrically locked. Without someone of the appropriate species to interface with the systems, we'd never be able to understand how they function." "I see," Major Crane said, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Very well, follow me. And remember, you're in a restricted military zone. Don't touch anything without permission, don't wander off on your own, and don't interfere with our operations." They were loaded onto a military transport that carried them deeper into the asteroid complex. Through the viewport, Tara could see the scope of the excavation. Entire asteroids had been hollowed out and converted into research facilities. Mining equipment worked around the clock to extract dragon artifacts from the ancient rock, and at the center of it all, connected by a network of pressurized tunnels, was the largest asteroid of all, the primary dig site, Major Crane explained, following Tara's gaze. "We've uncovered what appears to be an intact dragon research laboratory. The technology inside is beyond anything we've ever seen. Have you been able to activate any of it?" Dr. Vasquez asked with professional interest. "Our scientists have managed to power up several devices, though we're not entirely sure what they do. The reality stabilizer, however, has proven particularly interesting." Tara felt Pyrion tense beside her, though he gave no outward sign of alarm. "In what way?" Dr. Vasquez pressed. "It generates readings that our physicists describe as impossible," Major Crane said with obvious pride. "Energy signatures that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. Command believes it might be some kind of advanced weapon system." "Has anyone attempted to fully activate it?" Pyrion asked quietly. Major Crane turned to look at him, and Tara saw something unsettling in the officer's expression. It wasn't just suspicion. It was hunger. The kind of look people got when they were on the verge of a major discovery. "Not yet," she replied. "We're still running preliminary tests, but based on the energy readings, a full activation should happen within the next few days." Tara and Dr. Vasquez exchanged alarmed glances. They'd thought they had time to assess the situation and plan their approach. Instead, it sounded like the hegemony was on the verge of triggering exactly the kind of catastrophe Pyrion had warned them about. The transport docked with the central asteroid, and they were escorted through a series of military checkpoints before finally reaching the excavation site itself. What Tara saw there took her breath away. The Dragon Laboratory was massive, carved directly into the heart of the asteroid. The walls were covered with crystalline panels that pulsed with soft light, and the floor was inlaid with complex geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. Holographic displays floated in midair, showing star charts and technical diagrams in languages that predated most of galactic civilization, and in the center of it all was the reality stabilizer. The device was enormous, easily the size of a small building. It looked like a cross between a technological marvel and a work of art, with flowing curves and organic shapes that suggested it had been grown rather than built. Energy coursed through transparent conduits that ran along its surface, and the air around it shimmered with barely contained power. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Major Crane said, gesturing to the device. "Our physicists estimate that it contains more energy than most star systems. If we can figure out how to weaponize it, you cannot," Pyrion said urgently, struggling to rise from his anti-grav platform. "Major Crane, you must listen to me. This device is not a weapon. It is a containment system designed to prevent dimensional incursions. If you activate it without proper protocols, you will tear a hole in the fabric of reality itself. That's quite a claim, the Major replied skeptically. Do you have any evidence to support it? Pyrion's eyes began to glow with inner fire. I am the evidence. I am one of the last survivors of the civilization that built this technology. I witness firsthand what happens when dimensional barriers are breached. Major, I am begging you to shut down your experiments and evacuate this facility. I'm afraid that's not possible, Major Crane said firmly. This operation has the highest priority classification from Hegemony Command. We have our orders. Then you are condemning billions of innocent people to death, Pyrien said quietly. That's enough, the Major snapped. Dr. Vasquez, I suggest you keep your cultural consultant under better control. Now, shall we begin the analysis? Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, her scanner already active. Of course, Major. We'll need to examine the device from multiple angles to understand its function. As the xenoarchaeologist began her fake examination, Terra moved closer to Pyrien. The dragon was trembling with effort, his breathing increasingly labored. She could see that simply being this close to the reality stabilizer was affecting him somehow. What's wrong? She whispered. The device, Pyrien replied telepathically. It's already partially activated. I can feel it pulling at the dimensional barriers. The hegemony has no idea how close they are to catastrophe. How long do we have? Hours, perhaps less. The energy buildup is accelerating. Terra looked around the laboratory, noting the positions of guards and scientists, the layout of equipment and escape routes. They were outnumbered at least 20 to 1, surrounded by military personnel and hundreds of thousands of kilometers from the nearest safe haven. And somewhere in this facility was a device that could destroy the galaxy if it wasn't shut down in the next few hours. She'd been in bad situations before, but this was definitely a new personal record. Dr. Vasquez, she called out, trying to sound casual. I'm getting some interesting readings over here. Could you take a look? The xenoarchaeologist approached, her expression carefully neutral. What kind of readings? The kind that suggest we need to have a very urgent private conversation, Terra said quietly. Vasquez nodded and turned to Major Crane. Would it be possible for my team to have a few minutes to discuss our initial findings? We may need to adjust our analysis approach based on what we're seeing. Very well, the Major replied. But make it quick. Command is expecting a preliminary report within the hour. As soon as they were out of earshot of the guards, Dr. Vasquez leaned in close to Terra and Pyrien. Please tell me you have a plan. Working on it, Terra muttered, her eyes scanning the laboratory for anything they could use. Pyrien, can you shut down the device remotely? Yes, but I would need direct interface with the primary control matrix, the dragon replied. And the moment I begin the shutdown sequence, every alarm in this facility will activate. How long would you need? Approximately 10 minutes for a complete shutdown. But Terra, the process will require all of my remaining life energy. I will not survive it. Terra felt her heart clench. There has to be another way. There is not, Pyrien said gently. This is what I was meant to do. This is why I survived when so many others did not. To prevent the mistakes of the past from destroying the future. Before Terra could argue, Major Crane's voice echoed through the laboratory. Dr. Vasquez, I'm afraid your time is up. Command wants to proceed with the final activation sequence immediately. Terra watched in growing horror as hegemony scientists began moving toward control stations around the reality stabilizer. In minutes, they would trigger the very catastrophe that had destroyed Dragon civilization 3,000 years ago. She looked at Pyrien, saw the resolve in his golden eyes, and knew that she was about to make a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. However long that turned out to be. Do it, she whispered to the dragon. But Pyrien, thank you. For everything. Thank you, Terra Vance. Pyrien replied, his mental voice filled with warmth and gratitude. For showing me that kindness still exists in the universe, for giving me hope when I had none, for allowing me to die as something more than a curiosity in a cage. As the hegemony scientists reached for their activation controls, Pyrien began to glow with an inner fire that Terra had never seen before. The ancient dragon was drawing on the very last of his life force, channeling it into one final act of heroism, and somewhere in the distance, alarms began to sound. The moment Pyrion began interfacing with the reality stabilizer, every system in the Dragon laboratory went haywire. Holographic displays flickered and changed, showing warnings in the ancient dragon script that none of the hegemony personnel could read. Emergency lights bathed the massive chamber in pulsing red illumination, and a deep, resonant alarm echoed through the asteroid complex. "What the hell is happening?" Major Crane shouted over the chaos, her hand moving instinctively to her sidearm. Terra watched in awe as Pyrion's massive form began to levitate above his anti-grav platform, his scales blazing with an inner fire that seemed to draw energy from the very air around him. His golden eyes had become incandescent, and when he spoke, his voice was no longer the gentle mental whisper she'd grown accustomed to. This was the voice of a being who had once commanded the respect of galaxies. "I am Pyrion, last guardian of the dragon hegemony," he declared, his words echoing both audibly and telepathically throughout the facility. "And I will not allow you to repeat the mistakes that destroyed my people." The reality stabilizer began to respond to his presence, its crystalline surface pulsing in rhythm with Pyrion's glowing scales. Energy patterns that had been chaotic and unstable started to align into complex geometric forms, and the dangerous dimensional distortions that Terra could now sense at the edge of her consciousness began to stabilize. "Stop him," Major Crane ordered, drawing her weapon. "Security, take down that dragon now!" The hegemony guards opened fire, their blaster bolts striking Pyrion's massive form with concentrated fury. But instead of causing damage, the energy seemed to be absorbed into his scales, adding to the brilliant fire that surrounded him. Each blast only made him stronger, more radiant. "Fools," Pyrion said, his voice carrying a note of profound sadness. "You cannot stop what has already begun. The reality stabilizer will be shut down, the dimensional barriers will be sealed, and the entities will remain trapped in their parallel realm. This I swear on the memory of 17 billion dragons who died to save the universe once before." "Doctor." Vasquez grabbed Terra's arm, pulling her toward the laboratory's exit. "We need to get out of here. When that thing shuts down, there's going to be a massive energy discharge." But Terra found herself frozen in place, unable to look away from Pyrion's sacrifice. The ancient dragon was literally burning himself alive to save a galaxy that had forgotten his people ever existed. His massive form was becoming translucent. His life force pro. Bought for 3 credits and meant to die, the dragon roared when the mechanic refused to sacrifice it. HFY.